Well, our big focus, US President Donald Trump launched a multi-front trade assault on Brazil, threatening it with massive new tariffs and demanding the end of criminal charges against his ally, former President Jair Bolsonaro. Now, I'll tell you why this is so significant, because Trump's tariff letter to Brazil is far more aggressive, with a much higher levy than any other trade missive he's sent out this week. And it prompted Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva to push back on what he called interference in the nation's affairs. But this letter threatens $42 billion in annual US imports, everything from steel to coffee, and the potential collapse of a trading relationship with one of the few countries where the US runs a trade surplus. The letter goes on to insist Brazil has treated US social media companies unfairly, accusing the government of censoring free speech and threatening a 50% levy on Brazilian imports. But do note that letter makes no mention of the additional BRICS levy that Trump had just recently threatened. But at 50%, Brazil would face a higher tariff than any other country in the world, based on the rates the administration has confirmed so far. And as I mentioned, Brazil's president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, firmly rejected Trump's demand that legal proceedings against former President Bolsonaro be dropped, and his claim that a 50% tariff on Brazilian imports was necessary to close a trade deficit that does not in fact exist. We spoke to international relations analyst Uriah Fancelli.
Trump's 50% tariffs on Brazilian products might have, in a very limited sense, a political angle. He's clearly trying to protect Jair Bolsonaro, Brazil's former president, from what he's calling a political witch hunt by the country's judiciary. Let's not forget, Bolsonaro tried to stage a coup in January 2023, very similar to Trump's Capitol riot. His supporters invaded the buildings of all three branches of government in Brasilia, and as a result, Bolsonaro is now banned from running for office and could even face prison. So this pressure from Trump isn't just about economics, it's a message to his own base. He's presenting Bolsonaro as a victim of the same forces he claims are after him. It fits his narrative. Strong leaders, silenced by institutions, fighting for freedom. But honestly, I don't think that's the real reason behind such drastic economic measure. What really matters is timing. As I've been saying all week, this announcement comes right after the BRICS summit hosted by Lula. And Trump had already threatened to slap tariffs on countries that took what he called an anti-American stance. So this move is clearly part of a broader strategy to punish governments he sees as challenging the US global dominance. And it has nothing to do with trading balances. In fact, Trump's letter claims that the US is being treated unfairly by Brazil, but that's simply not true. The United States actually runs a trade surplus with Brazil. So this isn't about correcting economic injustice. It's about sending a political message. And there's more. Trump has always used economic pressure as leverage. He did it with Mexico, he did it with Canada, and he's even talked about taking control of the Panama Canal to push out foreign influence. His goal is to reset US influence in Latin America, not through dialogue, but through pressure. And tariffs are his favorite tool. This isn't about defending shared values or protecting American voters. It's about control, about reshaping the map of influence in the region and selling that as patriotism to his base. He wraps it in slogans, but in the end, it's old school power politics dressed up in America First language.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump has announced a fresh round of tariffs on imports from 7 nations: Sri Lanka, Algeria, Iraq, Libya, the Philippines, Moldova, and Brunei. These tariffs will come into effect on the 1st of August. The White House has shared letters sent by Trump to leaders of these 7 nations, which mention the tariffs they will face while exporting goods to the United States. The letters assign individual tariff rates for each country. Algeria, Sri Lanka, and Iraq received import tax rates of 30%. Brunei, Libya, and Moldova got 25%. and the Philippines was assigned 20%. But Wednesday's letters are the latest in a slate the Trump administration sent to nations around the globe. On Monday, in fact, the US president had threatened Japan and South Korea with 25% tariff, stepping up pressure on the two historical US allies and a dozen other economies to reach trade deals with Washington.
And we'll go 10%, so we'll do the same thing.
Moving on, the devastating floods sweeping through central Texas have actually claimed at least 119 lives, with over 160 people still accounted for. The catastrophe has triggered fresh scrutiny of the country's emergency response model, especially as US President Donald Trump, who recently proposed phasing out the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is now touting a swift federal response to this current crisis. Moving on from conducting stem cell experiments in a glove box to experiencing microgravity for the first time, Indian Air Force officer Shubhanshu Shukla is now nearing the end of his 14-day mission aboard the International Space Station. The Axiom 4 crew is set to return to Earth any day. With it, the 4-member crew will bring back what scientists are calling a treasure trove of data, especially significant for India, which made its debut at the 25-year-old Microgravity lab. We have a reaction from Shubhanshu Shukla, beaming from space. Listen in.
So Shuks, I know you've been very busy with your research that has been brought up from India. Can you tell me about some of the research you've been doing and why it's been particularly interesting and exciting?
Of course. Thank you so much for your question. I would agree. Yes, I have been very busy since the time we have come doing a lot of research on the station. And I'm very excited and this mission is actually kind of opening the doors for microgravity or space research for Indian researchers and scientists. And I'm so proud that ISRO has been able to collaborate with national institutions all over the country. And they came up with some fantastic research, which I am doing on the station for all the scientists and researchers, and it is exciting. It is a joy to do this, and the research spans various domains, various disciplines, right from doing some stem cell research and to growing some seeds, seeing the effect of microgravity on seeds, also evaluating the cognitive load on astronauts while they are interacting with screens on board the station. So it has been fantastic, and I feel proud to be this kind of bridge between the researchers and the station to conduct this research on behalf of them. One particular research which I am really excited about is the stem cell research, wherein the scientists are trying to explore that whether by adding supplements to the stem cells, is it possible to accelerate the recovery or the growth, or to repair the injury. And it has been great to work in the glove box doing this research for them. And I'm just really, really excited to be doing this. And I'm extremely proud of all the teams who have worked together to put up this research for us, and just happy to be here doing this for them. Thank you.
Our science editor, Palab Bagla, now joins us with a quick update this morning. Always a pleasure to have you on our show, Palab sir. Shubhanshu Shukla is now nearing the end of his 14-day mission, as you've been reporting. But is his stay likely to be extended?
Well, it depends on when it started. What do you count as the start time? If you look at the correct figures, he has been docked at the International Space Station for a little over 11 days. It's a 14-day mission. So nominally, if all goes well, there is still some time. So if all, NASA is the agency which will announce when the undocking and splashdown will happen. They have not given an update. So we cannot speculate on whether it's an extended mission or not. But as of now, he has spent 11 days docked to the International Space Station. And the count continues. He has completed most of his experiments, and the splashdown for this Axiom 4 mission, which I sometimes call Mission Akash Ganga, is likely to happen off the coast of California. And what I can also add is that Group Captain Shukla and the 3 other crew members have already done 230 orbits of the Earth. So Parikrama pe Parikrama, and also that he's traveled nearly 10 million kilometers in journey from Earth as he is orbiting the Earth on the International Space Station. So 11 days and counting as docked, and it will take some more time for them to return. So nominally, things are going as per plan. We have to wait for an update from NASA on the undocking and splashdown. There are many variables they have to consider. The weather off the coast of California, the weather in the descent corridor. So many things have to be considered, and we would hopefully get an update very soon. But as of now, Group Captain Shukla, safe and healthy, enjoying his stay at the International Space Station, like we saw in this bite which came from a little earlier.
As always, sir, thank you so much for joining us with the latest information coming in. On that note, we're slipping into a very quick commercial break. Back in a moment with the latest updates for you. Do stay tuned. Let's get you the latest update from Canada now. In a fresh update that could impact thousands of immigration hopefuls, Canada has revised the minimum settlement funds required for candidates under its express entry system. So the new thresholds announced by Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada will apply from the 28th of July 2025, and candidates must update their proof of funds by that date to remain eligible for permanent residency. My colleague Maha Siddiqui has been tracking all the finer developments for us. She joins us live from Vancouver at the moment. Maha, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Take us through these new rules.
Thank you, Parmeshwar. The new rules suggest that there will be a change in the fund requirement that anybody who's applied under express entry needs to show. This will now rise by about $600 is what we understand for one person. So if one person is applying for it, it will now be almost above $15,000 that they'll have to show as a fund requirement. Apart from that, it depends on the number of people, that is the number of family members that that person is particularly applying for, and funds for that have been raised as well. Now, this is an annual exercise that is undertaken by IRCC, which is the department in Canada, the federal department that looks into immigration, refugee and citizenship issues. Why this is critical is because there are a large number of applicants, and over the last few years, we have seen an anti-immigrant sentiment that is emerging in Canada, which is new to Canada, considering that for 5 decades, Canada has, in fact, with open arms invited immigrants. But considering that sentiment has changed over the last couple of years because of the housing crisis and inflation, this becomes critical because also not just the fund requirement, there is also other aspects that now continue to impact immigration in Canada. First of all, the categories under which the immigration is likely for skilled workers as well is now largely reduced to 5 to 6 categories, which includes health workers, those in the agriculture sector, trade, sciences, and these are all closely linked to the labor market requirements. So Canada is looking very closely at its requirements and who they want as part of the Canadian society, considering the skills that they bring to the Canadian labor market. And this is in that context now that we are also seeing the funds requirement that have been changed.
Maha, as always, thank you so much for taking us through the latest rules. The other big crucial story we're tracking, Starlink, the satellite communication firm owned by Elon Musk, has received regulatory clearance from the Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Centre in space to launch its satellite-based internet services in India as per our sources. Sources indicate that Starlink becomes the 3rd company to receive approval for satellite communication SATCOM services from the Department of Telecommunications after OneWeb and Reliance Jio. Aishwarya Patil has the latest details for us. She joins us live at the moment. Aishwarya, we're given to understand that the final hurdle has been cleared for Starlink's India launch.
That's correct. In-space authorization or clearance that has been granted to Starlink was one of the final steps. As far as the regulatory list of regulatory challenges for Starlink are concerned, that has been granted now for the first generation of its constellation, which has a fleet of about 4,480 satellites in the low Earth orbit that have gotten approval to beam over India. Now, this authorization has cleared the path for Gen 1. Gen 2 will again increase its capacity going forward when that happens ahead of here also. What NDTV Profit had in fact reported back in May was that this first fleet or Gen 1 constellation will have a capacity or an internet service provider that will have a capacity about 600 Gbps over India in the first phase of its launch, is what we had reported earlier. In fact, Starlink will be looking at the next few steps, which will be authorization of a test spectrum. They will have to write to the Department of Telecommunications to ask for a test spectrum and show their capacity and capability to operate their services in India, which will happen in phases again. A trial will be done to prove that their services are in fact working under the security norms that the Indian government has defined. And lastly, the authorization is for the next 5 years or whatever is the shelf life of the Gen 1 satellites, because they will also need to be phased out in a manner in the next 5 years. So whichever happens earlier, Starlink has been provided this authorization, regulatory hurdle has been cleared, and they will now move on to the next step of test spectrum, setting up Earth stations, and then by end of 2025, they aim to provide their satellite communication services to India.
Thanks, Aishwarya, for taking us through the latest information and also giving us the timeline for this. With that, let's turn our attention now to our neighborhood, to Bangladesh. The brutal crackdown on student protesters there last year was ordered by then Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. This is what a leaked audio reveals of a conversation with a senior government official, the BBC is reporting. In the audio that the BBC has verified and NDTV is yet to independently authorize, Sheikh Hasina can be heard saying that she directed the security forces to use lethal weapons and shoot wherever they find them, as in the protesters. Hasina was said to be at her residence in Dhaka when she made the call on the 18th of July, and hours after the call, military-grade rifles were used by the security forces in Dhaka. This is what the BBC is reporting, citing police documents. My colleague Saurabh has been tracking all the latest details for us. He joins us live from the newsroom at the moment. So we're given to understand that the Awami League is hitting out at this latest report that the BBC has verified?
Well, this has become a huge political row between, of course, the Awami League and also, the Mohammad Yunus-led interim government, because the report which has been published by the BBC is claiming that obviously Sheikh Hasina ordered these kind of quelling of protests with brute force, and they are referring to an audio clip which, of course, is something that's the key piece of evidence to make that inference. However, what we are hearing from the Awami League is that, well, these audio clips, they say, has been taken out of context and they say that it's a very small part of a longer conversation. Secondly, they say that the publication has not shared, not mentioned the source of the audio clip, but the source happens to be the prosecution team, which of course is conducting the trials against Sheikh Hasina. So this has become a political row, not only over the veracity of the clip, but also the inference made from the clip, which of course has been reported by the BBC. And of course, this is something that now is dominating the political discourse in Bangladesh, whether Sheikh Hasina is responsible for the crackdown, or whether there were infiltrators amongst the protesters, as the Bangladesh Awami League says that Hizbul Tahrir, which is of course a group that is known with extremist radical links, whether they also instigated some of these, sort of violent incidents that took place during that August revolution. So there are questions on the report that's been published, but again, the report very clearly makes the inference that Sheikh Hasina did order these, sort of killings based on an audio clip, which has been challenged, the veracity of which has been challenged, the authenticity of which has been challenged by the Bangladesh Awami League.
Thank you so much, as always, Saurabh, for joining us with the latest information coming in and also clarifying the details. In other news, Russia has targeted Ukraine with a record 728 drones. This assault comes just hours after US President Donald Trump pledged to send more defensive weapons to Kyiv and aimed unusually sharp criticism at Russian President Vladimir Putin. In fact, these attacks, they are the latest in the series of escalating air assaults in recent weeks that have involved hundreds of drones in addition to ballistic missiles, straining Ukrainian air defenses at a perilous moment in the war. Meanwhile, over in Washington, Western media reports are claiming that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth halted a planned shipment of American weapons to Ukraine on the 2nd of July without notifying the White House. The pause shipment included key military hardware, and some of these munitions had already arrived in Poland and were actually en route to Kyiv when the order came through. Meanwhile, a suspected Chinese state-sponsored hacker is behind bars in Italy. He is accused of cyber espionage targeting US COVID-19 research. A 33-year-old was arrested last week in Milan's airport just as he arrived on holiday with his wife. The US Justice Department says he's part of a Chinese hacking group linked to Beijing's Ministry of State Security. Well, planet heating pollution tripled the death toll from the quietly devastating heat wave that seared Europe at the end of June. Early analysis covering a dozen cities has found, as experts warned of a worsening health crisis that is being overlooked. Scientists estimate that high heat killed 2,300 people across 12 major cities as temperatures soared across Europe between the 23rd of June and 2nd of July. They attributed 1,500 of the deaths to climate breakdown, which has heated the planet and made the worst extremes even hotter. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is likely to travel to the United Kingdom by the end of this month for a visit that could see both sides formally ink the landmark India-UK free trade deal and explore ways to expand bilateral ties in defence and security. Both sides are in the process of finalising the dates for Prime Minister Modi's visit to the UK by the end of July or the first part of August, our sources have informed us. Nvidia has become the first company in history to reach a $4 trillion valuation. The market cap milestone for the US firm, which makes hardware to power the artificial intelligence boom, marks a rebound from earlier this year when the rise of Chinese AI startup DeepSeek caused Nvidia shares to dip. The achievement also comes despite US chip export restrictions that have dented sales to China. India is currently the leading country of origin for billionaire immigrants in the US. Forbes has noted in its America's Richest Immigrants 2025 list that was just published. Israel and Taiwan are next on the list. But the article further notes that cybersecurity mogul Jay Chaudhry is the richest Indian American in the US. He has a whopping net worth of over $17.9 billion. The Forbes list highlights Indian Americans like Jay Chaudhry, Sundar Pichai, and Vinod Khosla as prominent Indian origin billionaires. But overall, the richest immigrant in the United States is Tesla's boss, Elon Musk, who is also the richest man in the world with a whopping net worth of nearly $400 billion. Thank you for investing your time and watching this edition of The World 24/7. As always, we'll keep tracking the latest for you. Do stay tuned.